Hey guys, man, I appreciate you guys all showing up. I appreciate all the new people that are here, man. That's great stuff. I wanted to say one thing about the mentor roster. I know it's on, scroll down a little bit, but you ain't got to pull it up now. Just make a point to look at that. If you guys think that you can help somebody on there, there's a few that have been there for quite a while that asked for mentors that nobody stepped up for. Um, need to help these guys out, man, any way we can. So if you want to be a mentor or want to be a student, man, just message me or Ian. Um, which leads me to the next thing, man. I'm stepping away from the mentor leader position. I'm still going to be part of the class, still going to be helping whatever I can do until they get it where they can handle it themselves, I guess. And I know that it seems like they can, but I wanted to announce that Primeval is now the mentor leader, which has been posted. So with that being said, man, I'm going to turn that over to Prime and let him have at it, man.
Thanks, Horn. So thanks everybody for showing up tonight. I hope my plea wasn't lost on you. I really would have felt bad if the attendance plummeted with me taking over. So and gold in it for everybody who attended. So tonight we're talking turrets, base turrets. We're going to cover mostly focus on the most relevant turrets for sort of modern base defense. If when we get to the end, if you have questions about any of the turrets that weren't covered, we'll be glad to touch on those. And we'll also talk at the end a little bit about base turret placement as well, which is very critical. But before we start going into the slides, just one concept I want to cover out of the gate, and that's sort of the different categorizations of turrets. So there's really sort of two types of base turrets that you're going to have in your base, and some, there may be a mix, but for the most part, the turrets fall into two different categories. You have your stopper turrets, which are turrets that do a lot of damage, and that you're going to put in your channel to slow down incoming base fleets so that they have to sit, to kill them so that they don't get hit by the damage. And then therefore, while they're doing that, the other type of turrets, your back turrets, are going to be firing at them. So some of the examples of your stopper turrets are things like your scattergun turrets, your new blunderbuss turret. Even back in the day, turrets like Serbs or gargoyles were stopper turrets. And then your back turrets, you've got things like executioners, Deadeye executioners. You've got apocalypse mortars. And nowadays, with the new modern, some of the more modern stuff, you've got things like the Gatling gun turret and the Glacial, which are two of the things that we're going to talk about. Two of the turrets we're going to talk about tonight. So the way I'm going to go through this, I'm going to talk about the turret itself, what it does, what its capabilities are, what kind of damage it does, and all those things. And then I'll step you through a couple of the relevant specials that you might think about equipping on those turrets. And then I will show you my turret build. I'm going to lean heavily on the rest of leadership and certainly on Hornet to chime in if there's any. I'm not going to tell you all my turrets are the best builds. So if there's anybody who thinks they have a better build out there, please feel free to mention that as we go along. So if you pull up the slides, you'll see the first turret that's in the list tonight is the Blunderbuss turret. This is a new turret. It just came out in the Forsaken mission, probably 3 weeks ago now. It is a ballistic turret, so it deals ballistic type damage. That means when you're equipping it with specials, you're going to want to look for specials that boost ballistic damage or range or accuracy, things like that. This is a stopper turret. Go ahead, sorry. Somebody want to say something? Okay, guess not. This is a stopper turret, so this is definitely a turret you want to have in your channel where it's going to slow ships down, or if they don't slow down, they're going to get whacked. If you notice, this does base 11,400 damage. It's also a multi-shot turret, so that means it fires multiple projectiles, not just one. That's important when we get to talking about specials, because there are some specials out there for base turrets that increase the multi-shot. So you might want to look at those, especially if you don't have maybe some of the more relevant ballistic specials out there. This turret also has a spread damage, which means it does area damage. So it's not just a point-to-point turret. When it hits, it'll do area damage. It has 8 splash, so that means in the area 8, whatever that measurement is in Kixeye math, around where the turret hits, it will do splash damage. It has a range of 105, so that's pretty good range when you consider that about the longest ship-based weapon is around that same range, 104, 105. So you're going to probably hit most things that are coming into your channel. It's got a reload of 3.5, so it fires, or 3.75, so it fires relatively regularly. The next, if you want to move to the next slide, this is the first special that I think is the most relevant to this turret. This is the depleted uranium shells 3 BP. There's also a depleted uranium shells 1 and 2. They're just, lesser variants of this, but I put the 3 up there because this is definitely the one you want to go with. This boosts your ballistic damage, so you can see here on mine, I do have this partially retrofitted. I'm actually just finishing it now, but it boosts my ballistic damage by 52%, which is a pretty darn good boost to that ballistic damage, and it boosts the accuracy by 41.2%. So it's going to hit more frequently, and when it does, it's going to have a little more punch to it. If you want to move to the next slide, this special is the supercharged EM rails special. What this special does is, for ballistic turrets, it gives you a critical hit chance. So what does that mean? That means 25% of there's a 25% chance with each shot that you're going to do a critical hit, and a critical hit will do 300% damage. So if you're looking at a turret that has a base damage amount of 11,400, if you do a critical hit, you're going to do 3 times that much. So you're going to be up over 30,000 damage in that one shot. Now, keep in mind, KIXEYE math applies here, right? So it's not quite that straightforward, but it gives you sort of a rough idea of what's going to happen if you equip that special on there. The next blueprint, if you want to move to the next slide, this is the ballistic platform blueprint. This drops out of the draconian uranium bases, I believe, or maybe the regular draconian bases. This is a special you might want to consider looking at if you don't have any of the other ones. What this does is it increases the ballistic accuracy, so the turret will be more accurate, and it also gives you 40% resistance against stun. So whether that's a pinch or if there's some ship overload that might stun your turrets. I don't think most people are going to try and pinch these turrets when they're coming in. There's probably more valuable things to pinch. So I personally wouldn't use this on one of the blunderbuss turrets. But if you don't have either the DUS3 or the supercharged rails, it's probably the next best option to put on there, or possibly one of the multi-shot boosts that we'll talk about in a little while. So if you move to the next slide, I show you the build that I went with for my blunderbuss turret. So you can see I've got sits on a level 7 turret. It's got one permacrete panel and one, I can't remember what that is, but it defends against concussive damage. I think I put that on there when Revenge were popular. I just haven't swapped it out yet. But the turret itself has 348,120 health on it, and then the specials I put on are the supercharged EM rails and the DUS3 shells, the depleted uranium shells. So if you look on my turret, my damage is boosted up to 23,392, and then you still have that 25% chance of a critical hit, which would basically put that damage up over 60,000. So if I hit one ship with that, it would eat up a good bit of even some of the modern base ships that have 90,000 plus armor points. You'd be getting rid of 2/3 of that ship in one hit. It does not, as far as I know, have the defensive bypass. Some of the turrets, you'll see that as we move on, have what's called defense bypass. So, for example, if you come into my base with a fleet that has 80% ballistic defense, and this turret fires and hits it, it's only going to do 80% of the damage. But some of the turrets now have bypass, so that means it just bypasses any defenses and it does the max damage every time. But this one does not have that. Anybody have anything to add on the blunderbuss turret before we move on to the next one?
It does say it has 100% bypass.
All right, I must be missing it. I'm not looking at the BP, so maybe I just didn't see it.
And
Yeah,
then
you're right.
the
It
other,
does. Sorry, it
the
does
other,
have ballistic defense bypass. Yep.
the other thing to keep in mind, though, too, is that whether or not you have your armors, art up to 15, and as well as your specials, that will change your damage and health of the turret and what it's going to do as well.
Yeah, I mean, as we talk about on every one of these mentor shows, retros are critical. all of these items as quickly as you can should be retroed up to R15 to get the maximum amount of them. Anyone else before we move on?
Well, see, I use the multi-shot, the hydro. What is it?
Barrels.
Yeah, the hydro barrels, because they give you a 30, plus 30 on corrosive, also besides your ballistic. Plus, it's a plus 2 multi-shot.
Right, so that means basically you're going to boost it. This is a 12 multi-shot now, so you're going to put that up to 14. So it'll do 1/6 more damage basically because it's dealing out those 2 extra shots. So that's another possibility. Yeah.
Plus the corrosiveness.
Right. All right, so let's move on to the next one. The next turret is the new minigun turret. This one also, I believe, was a Forsaken Mission blueprint. This is a concussive turret, so it does concussive damage, which I think up until recently anyway, really wasn't a type of damage that you could defend particularly effectively against, although now we do have some concussive defense armors out there. It does base damage of 2,528. It has concussive defense bypass of 50%, so that means even if you do have concussive defense armors on there, they're only going to be half as effective. It has a range of 150, which is a pretty good range. We're going to talk a little bit later in the show about turret placement, and with this turret, it's particularly important where you place this. This turret has what's called a wind-up, and so if you think of a minigun, right, it spins, and essentially what the wind-up is it slowly spins up, and as it hits targets, it spins faster and faster, and therefore fires faster and faster. So when you place this, it's very important that it's placed so that it covers your entire channel, because if the ships move out of range, it will wind down, and then it's got to wind back up again when they move back into range, and it'll dramatically decrease the amount of damage it does. So you really want to place this turret smartly in your base, so that you get it covering the maximum amount of your channel. This turret also does splash damage too, so any ship that's basically within 1 square of where the shot lands will also take damage. If you move on to the next slide, this is one of the specials that's really important to put on this turret. This is the expanded concussive charge. This special boosts your damage by 60% and your splash by 60%, which is a pretty big jump. It's very important if you have this turret in your base that you put this special on there, especially because it's really the only special that has any important effect on this turret. So if you move to the next slide, you'll see my turret build. You'll notice this one does not have any armor on it. That's because it sits on my island, and if they get to my island, there's no need to waste armor on my turrets because I'm already dead anyway. You'll see I have the expanded concussive charge on this. I put stun resist panels on this because when it first came out, I actually thought maybe people might pinch it, and it does sit on my island where people drop pinches quite a bit, so I did use the stun resist on it. And then you'll see at the bottom I have one of the transformers on there. We're going to talk about the transformers and what they do towards the end of the slideshow, but I have that slot filled with the offensive transformer, which boosts the damage output. So you can see on my turret, if you look under the attack section on the blueprint, you'll see my turret damage is boosted up to 5,459. So that's almost double the base damage of the turret.
And I can tell you this turret is extremely important as far as base defense goes. It does add a lot as far as somebody walking you or not walking you. It will kill them, basically. I mean, it's a very good turret, and if you have it, you should utilize it.
I would agree. This is pretty much, in my opinion, it's a must-have for base defense. If you haven't gotten this out of the FM yet, and if you're I realize not everybody can hit T5 yet, and everybody's working towards that, but if you're capable of getting this turret, I would highly recommend you win the BP, and then you go out and you get yourself some base parts and get it into your base as quickly as you can. You will be amazed at what difference it makes. Hornet or anybody else you want to add on this before we move on?
Looks awesome to me, man. I love it.
Yeah.
I will say one key with that gun is you want it to get the wind-up.
Yes.
With the wind-up, it's got to constantly be firing. So a lot of people were talking about when we put it in our channels to make sure it's covering a wide, if not all of your channel. That way it continually fires. Because if you watch it, it fires slow. Boom, boom. And then all of a sudden, boom, 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 boom. That's what you want it to be doing.
Yeah, it looks a little bit like one of the old javelin turrets when it fires, but if you can imagine a javelin firing a shot every half second or so, that's what it looks like when it's fully wound up. It's really a very effective turret.
Yeah, it goes from like being a javelin to almost a scatter gun or something like that, like just as fast as it fires.
Yeah, it really and every time it hits, it's doing that 5,000 concussive damage. So this is really important.
When it fires like that, is it firing itself like that, or do you have to put an additive on that?
No, it fires like that on its own.
Okay.
Okay, let's move on to the next slide. So the next set of two blueprints we're going to look at are the scattergun turrets. These turrets are actually probably even more important to talk about now, because if you saw any of the statistics on the new baser that's coming out in this month's raid, it's very weak against corrosive damage. It has very minimal corrosive deflection. I think it's only 60. So these turrets with their deep damage should really be effective. If you don't have these in your base, you should make it a priority to add them in. And if you do have them, I highly recommend you hang on to them and get them as beefed up as you can, because I think they're going to be very important against the new baser. So the first one is the Draconian Scattergun turret. This was a blueprint. I think actually this was released in a campaign and then maybe later in a raid. You'll see from my blueprint I have two of them, which I think is the max you can have right now. This is a corrosive turret, so it deals corrosive damage, which is that Scourge technology, although this is its Draconian tech, so I guess they pirated the Scourge technology. It has a pretty big splash area. It does 12.4 splash, so that's about a square and a quarter. Has a 50 spread, which means it deals it's spread over quite a bit of range, or quite a bit of area. It has a range of 105, so again, a pretty good range. And you look at this base damage, 18,000 is a lot of damage. A lot of corrosive damage coming out against a ship that doesn't have a lot of corrosive defense. That'll be very important. The other thing to note about the new baser is that it also has the 100% defensive handicap that all the new hulls have had, which means you cannot equip the anti-corrosive armor on it and have it have any effect. So those ships coming in, when this turret fires, it's going to take, outside of the 60 deflection, it's going to take the bulk of that 18,000 damage. So these are critical turrets to get in your base. You'll see I have this at rank 15. So these are retro. You can retro these up. It boosts the damage. You really want to get these retroed as quickly as you can. The nice thing about this turret, it deals submerged damage. So if you get one of these by your thermal ship in your base, those subs are not going to be able to get by. They will get sunk immediately. And the last line here, you'll notice it has the corrosive defense bypass of 100%. One thing I think I want to mention when we talk about defense bypass that I didn't clarify, there are two, well, there's really more than two, but there's two basic kinds of defense now in this game. There are the percentage-based defenses that we're all used to, 50% ballistic defense and all that, which essentially lowers the damage of the shot by a percentage. But now there's the new deflection statistic. So the hull that has 60 deflection for corrosive, that 60 deflection will still count, but because it has the bypass, it will not count if they use that corrosive armor. So just a note. Let's move on to the next slide. This is the Basilisk turret. This is essentially the Draconian Scattergun's little brother. It essentially has the same statistics, except it just deals quite a bit less damage. It does 10,000 damage. Other than that, it's essentially the same turret. Same type of damage, same type of weaponry. Move on to the next slide. You'll see these are the hydroxide-coated barrels that Hornet was just talking about a little bit ago. This is a special that you pretty much must equip on your corrosive turrets. It boosts the multi-shot by 2. So the Drax Scattergun has a multi-shot of 10, and so does the Basilisk turret. So you're basically going to boost your damage 20% with that. Plus, it gives a 30% corrosive damage boost. So you're going to see the damage on those turrets go up nicely if you equip this on there. The last one, you'll see my Draconian Scattergun turret. This is essentially my main stopper turret in my base. If I didn't know the new hulls were coming out, I would probably change this over to a blunderbuss, but since these new basers are coming out, I'm actually going to leave this here. I really have this thing loaded up with armor. I've got 2 permacrete panels on there. I've got the hydroxide coated barrels, and then I also have the the ablative armor panels, which gives me 100% explosive defense, which really negates the damage from those mortars from the Vendettas. And then I also have the defensive boost transformer on here, which adds more defensive buffs to the turret itself. So this turret's pretty hard to kill. Those guys sit there for a little bit trying to kill this turret, and it's banging them with 18,000 damage, 18,720 damage to be specific, when every time it fires. So this is sort of the cornerstone of the stopper turrets in my base. Anyone want to add anything before we go on to the next one?
I totally agree with what
yeah.
you're saying. With this new, the same assessment with the new hull. So I think if you have scatter guns and/or ballistic, that's going to be the two ways of stopping this new hull. The launchers are okay. I think you can leave your Vanks alone and stuff like that. I don't plan on building a behemoth or Omega behemoth or whatever the special behemoth is, but if you have one, it might be a good time to get ready to put that in your base as well, because it's weak against that as well.
Yeah, those are the two main weaknesses are going to be corrosive and ballistic. So yeah, if you don't have a ballistic, if you're looking to beef up your guard and you're thinking about building a new guard ship, ballistic might be a good way to go. The Vendettas are also pretty weak against ballistic, so either way, no matter what you're getting hit on with, it'll probably help you out. All right, the next turret we have is the Glacial turret. This is another one that to me is just a must-have in your base. If it comes out, if you get the opportunity to win this and you don't have it, I would definitely make it a priority. This is a pretty mean little turret. It's actually the one that gives me the most fits when hitting a base. It's a radioactive cryo turret, so it basically launches a field of radioactive ice out into the channel. It slows your ship down. It deals a heck of a lot of damage, as you can see here, 65,000 damage, and it just sits on the water. Your ships drag through it, which means you're in the water for longer. You're getting hit with more ship damage. You're getting hit with more damage from back turrets. Those Apocalypse mortars are falling on you, because your ship's slowed down, and then the whole time you're in that ice field, it's dealing radioactive damage to you. So this is a very, very mean, nasty turret. As far as specials go, if you want to move to the next slide, there's not a ton of specials out there that really help you with this. If you happen to get this dropping out of one of the Dracuranian bases, you might want to put this on because it does boost the radioactive reload by 10%. It doesn't boost the damage, but it does boost the reload, so it's going to fire 10% quicker, which is, if you have the option to put it on there, you might as well, because it is, like I said, it is a pretty important turret to get in your base. This is another turret where placement is pretty important. The more of your channel that this covers, the better, because this really gives base hitters fits. If you move to the next slide, you'll see my build on this. I do have that frontline ZU on there. I have the offensive transformer on it. And then I got this little doohickey, which the BP's in here later, but this is the cadmium solar panels. So what this does is it gives you a little boost to your base, to your total base power. So where I have an open special slot, I pretty much always put that on there because it gives you another 200 base power to play with. And the more you build these big turrets and load them up with specials and armor, the more you need more base power. So if you have an open slot, it's a real quick refit time. I think it's less than 12 hours. Drop that in there and you get 200 more base power to play with.
I have an option for this.
Oh, good.
Some weapons you want them to fire sooner than later. This is one of those weapons you want it to fire as soon as possible, because then its reload will be much sooner when it has to reload, because it has a long reload. I opted out for the AT transform for range, because then it's going to fire 10, I don't know how many tiles 10 is, but it's going to fire sooner than later, which means the next time it fires, it's going to fire that much quicker.
That's a very good option. I completely agree with you. If you have trouble positioning it in your channel so that you can't get it to fire pretty much right away, that is a very good option.
Now the other weapon, the minigun turret, I opted out for damage on that one. It's different, but it has different purpose. So I guess it all depends on where it is in your base, and for the glacial, I opted for the range.
Yeah, there's only so many places where you can put turrets where they cover your whole channel, right? So if you have one of these sort of must-have cover your whole channel type of turrets that you can't quite get there, yeah, when we look at the transformers in just a second, you'll see what we're talking about. It is kind of a nice option to go with there. All right, let's move on to the next set of turrets. These are your executioner turrets. So these are back turrets. They sit at the back of your base and fire at fleets as they're coming up and moving through your channel. The first one is the Deadeye Executioner, which is essentially the beefed up version of this turret. It does 7429 base damage. It fires a salvo of 3 missiles at a time. It has a 10-second reload. So it does have a fairly decent reload time, and that's pretty long. They are retargetable, which means that if they hit a ship and it sinks, the ones in flight will move on to the next target, which is kind of nice. That means, once you kill a ship, you don't want to waste any of that damage output, so you can get that get that missile to hit the next ship in line. It has a huge range of 199, so these turrets really cover a lot of ground. The nice thing about this is, man, if you got somebody who's trying to park ships outside of your base, or they're trying to, move around and rim you to get, maybe get that bloodthirst up, these turrets are going to be banging on them the whole time. And it's got 90% penetrative defense bypass, so it should be dealing a pretty hefty amount of damage as they move around your base. Again, these are pretty much must-have turrets for good base defense. The next one is the Executioner. This is sort of the baby brother there. It does a little bit less damage, as you can see. It does 6,600, I'm sorry, as compared to the roughly 7,400 for the Deadeye. Has quite a bit less range. 146 max range as opposed to 199. By the way, just a quick note that you'll see the range on the Executioner turrets have 2 numbers. This one, the Executioner says 50 to 146, and the Deadeye is 30 to 199. That first number is the minimum range. So that means once a ship moves inside of 50 from that turret, it will no longer fire at it. So when you get ships in close on your island, these turrets will probably stop firing. Again, these are in the Retro Lab, so mine are at R15, which boosts the damage. Pretty important to do that. If you want to move on to the next slide, here's some specials you could look at for this. This one is Fire Support Platform M. This is a Drac base blueprint. It boosts your missile range by 25% and boosts your penetrating damage by 31%. So pretty nice beefs here. 20% over that 199 range on the Deadeye Executioner, gets you up to 250, which is, pretty insane range. And it'll put a nice 31% buff on that damage. The next one is Frontline Platform MC. This is really a lesser choice here because this is technically supposed to go on a frontline turret. It does boost the damage by 25%, but it also gives your turret 50% ballistic defense. Not that useful, really, especially in for a turret that sits on your island. But it does give you that 25% damage boost. So if you wanted to put that on there in lieu of something else, it's an okay option. I do believe it stacks with some of the specials, so that's another thing to consider. You could put this on and something else and get that extra penetrating damage boost.
I'd just like to say, if you want a different special, the Thermatic Casting 3, which mine is at R15, but the penetrating damage that it applies is plus 41%.
Yeah, those are research blueprints. I was going to mention them at the end, but yeah, that's a good point. There are research blueprints that boost these stats as well that you can do. Thermobaric casing, and there's one that boosts the range too. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but those are research tech that everyone should have.
Scramjet.
Yeah, Scramjet. Thank you. The next one I show here is priority targeting. So what does this do? This is kind of a cool special. Basically, it will fire at the target with the lowest amount of hit points. So what this does is it'll find the ships that are the weakest and kill them first. So for example, if you got a guy who's got a ship that's sitting in your channel that he's using as a tank and it starts to take damage, your execs would switch over from maybe ships that were sitting outside of your base to that one when the armor points drop down and help kill it faster. So it also would seek out, like, not that these ships are as common as they used to be, but back in the day when people used to run like Harlock Aegis in with fleets, those typically had quite a bit less armor, and it would find those and knock them out real quick, so they would lose that defensive buff. The next one is Smart Warheads. It does the same exact thing, but it has a few extra buffs that are nice. It gives you plus 49% accuracy. It adds 25% to your missile range and a 10% damage boost. So this one's a little bit better option overall than priority targeting, although it does use quite a bit more power. So, you have to trade that off at some point in time. You can see my exec build here. I went with the two damage boosters stacked on top of each other because these do stack, and I get my penetrating damage up by 56%. So these turrets are doing. This turret is a Deadeye Executioner. It's doing 15,645 damage. I don't know whether the thermobaric casing stacks or not. I'd have to look at that. If it does, it could be a better option overall. Might be worth looking at. Yeah, so if it does, that's probably a better choice overall to put on there. I don't know what it does for base power, but that's probably a good option.
It only adds plus 17%.
Okay, so that's even lower than these then. So that's probably a better option. I might have to refit my turrets with that. All right, so then at the end of this here, I have a few of the other blueprints that we talked about. The next slide just shows you the cadmium solar panels, and it adds that 200 to your max base power. These do not use any power, so it's also when you equip it, you get all of that 200 extra base power. The next BP here is the shielded electronics blueprint. So this is basically stun resist. I have this up to retro 15, so if you look at it, it gives me almost 75% stun resist on my turrets. That basically means that a pinch only lasts for just a few seconds when they use it. So it really you can see it sort of surprises people when they drop a pinch on their island and they think they're going to get, 10, 12 seconds of freedom from those turrets, and then all of a sudden they open back up after 2 or 3 seconds. It really does throw some people for a loop. The next slide is the transformer. This is the AT transformer. So what this does is it boosts your damage by 35%. So whatever turret sits on this, whatever weapon sits on this turret gets a 35% damage boost. Now you'll see that it also nerfs the defense a little bit. But again, if you put this on a back turret, losing that defense really isn't particularly damaging to you, because it by the time they get to your island, you're probably dead anyway. The next slide here is the ATR transformer, which is the one that I think that was Phoenix was chiming in, was mentioned. And this one boosts your turret range by 10, which is a whole square. So it's a pretty significant range boost. This makes a difference on some of my turrets. I think I have this on my Glacial too, but this is the difference between my Glacial reaching my whole channel and not reaching my whole channel. So you really want to look at that one if you need something to help get you out to the channel. Now it does hurt your damage by 10%, but for something like the Glacial that's already laying out pretty massive damage, losing 10% is really not a big deal. To Phoenix's point from earlier, when you consider that it's going to fire sooner, which means that reload's going to kick in sooner, which means overall you're dealing more damage for longer. So it's probably a smart trade-off. The next slide here is the last transformer. This is the DT transformer. This is the one that I showed you that I put on my Drax Scattergun. So it boosts all of your defenses. It boosts your ballistic defense by 15%, explosive by all your major types of damage by 15%. So it's just going to help that turret stay alive longer, which means it's going to help you deal damage for longer. It does, however, come with a damage decrease. So while it does keep turret alive longer, each shot is going to do 20% less damage. So there is, as with everything in Battle Pirates, there's a trade-off there.
Plus with that, if you read on there, it says armor abilities plus 30. That means if you put a explosive plate on there, you get that plus the 30. Well, I mean, it's the compound, but anyway, you get plus 30 on all the armor plates you put on there that have a percentage debuff or buff.
That's a pretty significant boost. This next shot here, I sort of show you just to give you an idea of where I placed all these turrets in my channel. Again, I'm not, or on my base, I'm not going to tell you that necessarily my base has everything right. I kill more fleets than I don't. I will say that, but that really came with some help I got right when I joined R1. So everybody's got something to learn in this game, right? So you'll see down in the front that first turret there right now is a frostbite turret. We didn't cover that one because we just sort of ran out of time, but that one does explosive damage. So that one's there. The next one is that really powerful Drax scatter gun that I told you about. And then in the back, you'll see on the very corner of my island is where my minigun is. That's so I get that max coverage of my channel there. That actually covers my entire channel. My glacial sits right next to it, and then the whole island basically is covered with execs and a couple of apocalypse mortars. And then way at the back there, it's hard to see, but it's right behind that last Vanquisher. That's a blunderbuss turret. So I figured just in case somebody survives long enough up there, that one should put the last ship out of its misery. And then this one again, this is just sort of a zoom in so you can see my turrets a little more closely in case you wanted to get a little bit closer look on where everything sits. That's all my slides. I do know that we had a couple other folks who wanted to chime in on turret placement. So I think Dragons wanted to say a little bit about what he did with his turret placement. So I'm gonna hand it over to Dragons, and then I think we'll probably be ready to wrap the show up and move on to the Q&A portion.
Hey, thank you. Okay, mine is actually quick. If you look down at my slide, I have 2 slides in there of my base. One is going to show how I have the ships and the turrets placed. One thing I've found is that you need to get them to work together. You can't just rely on the ships. You can't just rely on the turrets. You have to get both of them working together. And I'm pulling up that slide now. Okay, now
Which slides are you talking about? I'm sorry, I'm lost. I don't know where they're at.
okay, if you look at where he had his on the mentor page.
Wes Harold.
Yeah, Wes Harold. Sorry, thank you.
Oh, okay. I got you.
Sorry about that. I forgot to say that.
I just popped a link to them into the chat too. So if you just click on that, you should get the first slide, and then you should be able to just arrow over to the second one.
So does everyone have that?
Yep.
No, I don't see it.
Just go down to that chat window and click on the second link there. You should be able to get it.
Up on the mentor page, it's got the announcement, and then it's got Ian Mitchell's pictures that he just went over, and then right below that, it's Wes Harold's. Got 2 pictures there.
Okay, I see it.
Okay. Now, my channel's not as long as his is, but I actually managed to get it to where I have my ships, and although I have that line of scatters, they all are focusing on one point. I was actually impressed when I saw how this worked, to where everyone that comes into your channel, they never target specific turrets. They're always just letting the computer target everything. Well, when they're coming up this channel, everyone's targeting the Vanquisher, and they're ignoring the scatters. I was actually impressed when I saw this on how well this worked, that I want to share it. Because that Vanquisher can take a big beating. I mean, there's nothing that can kill that Vanquisher in 1 or 2 shots. And it just melts Revenges when it comes in because of that wall of scatters. Now, those scatters are not high turrets. They were like level 4s when I started. So you don't need to have huge amounts of turrets to actually, as far as levels to actually defend yourself. Yes, it will help, but you can work with other things. Then off on the left is where I have the glacial. I just got that. I actually just got the Apocalypse mortars too. And I'm putting those off on the side, so they're going to fire the channel all the way as they're coming in. Does anyone have any questions about this one?
No, but that's a very good point that you pointed out for people to keep in mind. When you are hitting a base, you need, it doesn't matter if you're hitting with Vanquisher, or not Vanquishers, but Vendettas or Revenges or anything like that. You need to watch out for those scatter guns, because they will kill you, and they will kill you fast. And it's like he said, most people don't pay attention to targeting, you know, those specific turrets versus the ships, and that's kind of what you need to watch out for. You can walk past a Vanquisher. It's not hard to do. I do it all the time through bases, and I just pay attention to the turrets, because that's actually what hurts me more than the Vanquisher itself. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're hitting and everything like that. Just pay attention to what turrets are around you, and you know what defenses your fleet actually has versus what that actual base has.
And if you go to the next slide, you'll actually see the ranges on that.
Yeah, this is a very useful view, by the way. Thank you for sharing this, because I think maybe not everybody knows you can do this in your base planner.
Yeah, I mean, because as you can see, it's like as soon as someone gets right past that last oil well, they're toast. They're getting the full force of everything.
Yeah, that's basically Death Alley right there.
Yeah. And as you said, yeah, people can get past the Vanquisher. But people focus on that Vanquisher and go, I gotta kill that. And then they don't realize that, wait, there's a scatter. I have scatter, nuclear, and penetration that all focus in at that point.
Yeah, and you can imagine what that'll do to the new hulls that are weak against scatter damage, right? Imagine parking one of them there, that hull will just melt.
And I just got the glacial, and I'm having it so where the glacial will fire and trap them there.
Let me ask you this, Dragons. Are you taking any splash back into your turrets when if they're going on that Vanquisher right there in the middle? How much do you got some explosive back there on them turrets? Is that what you got?
I am putting some armor on there. Hold on, let me show you, get that again. Also what I'm doing is, you see that Vanquisher on the far left? That has 5 Gale 3s on there, specifically to protect the Vanquisher and the scatters. Because yes, that is one found is I was always getting mortar death. And I'm actually putting the armor on there. I got the concussive plating on there, and I mainly have that just for the armor points.
Yeah, it does have nice armor. I have that on a couple of mine too, just for that very reason, because it does have quite a bit of armor points.
I'm very limited on the number of specials I have.
Yeah, you know, that's a good point, actually. I mean, the one thing to remember is a lot of the specials, especially the good base specials, do drop out of those, the regular Drac bases or the Drac Uranium bases. So if you're short on turret specials and you want to maybe try and find something to help you buff your turrets up, you can always hit some of the Uranium bases or the Drac bases. If you don't have fleets to do it yourself, both of those can be prepped, and whoever kills it wins the BP. So if you need help getting one dead, ask. I'm sure a lot of the bigger folks, I have a fleet of Centurions that will do either the Uranium bases or the Drac bases relatively painlessly, so I'll be glad to help out. I'm sure Lube and Hornet and everybody else would would do the same. So if you're short on specials, the Drac bases and the uranium bases are great places to get them. So start hitting those.
Yeah, I've been hitting them, and I haven't gotten any drops on them.
That's Kickside for you.
I know, and I can't use the crew to get it either.
No, it doesn't work on those. It's a good point. The Lucky Bastards crew will not get you blueprints out of Drac bases or the uranium bases. So don't bother wasting a crew on that. All right, I know Lube's probably twitching over there because I think we're a little, actually probably a little bit over on the normal show time, and we do want to give time for Q&A at the end. So unless anybody has anything else they want to cover, I think I'm going to hand the close over to Lube there, and we can move on to the Q&A portion of the show.
I have a follow-up real quick.
Go.
Last meeting I was in, I suggested a different form of approach for the subs. Speed to avoid damage. I did extensive testing in the method, and the explosion radius or diameter from the enemy ships, even in the 70 Reaver, are far too large to escape. So you're going to get hit by it. So I recommend everybody get with Hellspawn as soon as possible to discuss his build, because he's really good at dealing with how efficiently to build these things with armor. And I'm talking about your Hell Wraiths.
Yeah, I agree with you completely on that. I loaded mine up with explosive defense. Mine have, I don't know, 93% explosive defense or something. And they seem to hold up pretty well on the Reaver target. So I think I completely agree with that assessment. All right, well, I really want to thank everybody for showing up tonight. I think it was a good show. Thank you all we had really good dialogue, really good contributions from everybody. So, Lube, you want to close us out there, and we'll move on to Q&A?
Yes, sir. Once again, like he said, thank you for being here. The bonus to the Q&A is that that doesn't get recorded. So for you being here, you get to be involved in that. If anybody has any questions additionally, you can always come to any of us. I actually picked up something. Garby's over here right now, and he was like, I was telling him, I said, man, that's got my wheels spinning about my turrets and just really my specials. Going over the specials like that and just getting different ideas. So we'll kick it off into the Q&A part, and thanks for coming.
I did